The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the endless stretch of highway. Sarah Mitchell sat behind the wheel of her semi-truck, her hands steady on the steering wheel as she navigated the open road. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic sound of tires rolling over asphalt were familiar companions to her. For years, Sarah had been driving long hauls like this one, crisscrossing the country with nothing but her thoughts and the occasional podcast to keep her company. But tonight felt different. There was an uneasiness in the air that she couldn't quite shake. Sarah wasn't new to life on the road. Before becoming a truck driver, she had served in the military, where she specialized in logistics and supply chain operations. Her time in uniform taught her discipline, patience, and how to stay calm under pressure. These skills came in handy now, especially when dealing with the unpredictable nature of trucking. Still, there were moments when even someone as experienced as Sarah could feel out of their depth. And tonight seemed like it might be one of those nights. It started subtly, a faint rumble in the distance, growing louder by the second. At first, Sarah thought it was just another vehicle passing by, but then she caught sight of them in her rearview mirror, a group of bikers riding fast, their motorcycles weaving recklessly between lanes. They weren't close enough to cause trouble yet, but something about their formation made her uneasy. It wasn't uncommon for truckers to share the road with motorcyclists, but these riders didn't seem interested in simply getting from point A to point B. Their movements were erratic, almost aggressive, and they appeared to be gaining speed. As the minutes passed, the bikers drew nearer, forming a loose line behind her truck. Sarah glanced at her mirrors again, trying to gauge their intentions. Were they racing each other, or was something else going on? She slowed down slightly, hoping to let them pass without incident. But instead of overtaking her, the bikers matched her pace, staying dangerously close to her trailer. One of them revved his engine loudly, the sharp noise cutting through the quiet evening like a knife. Another biker swerved toward her side mirror, missing it by mere inches. Sarah's heart began to race, though she did her best not to show it. She knew better than to panic or make sudden moves. Instead, she focused on maintaining control of her rig, keeping both hands firmly on the wheel. Inside the cab, two pairs of watchful eyes observed everything silently. Max and Luna, her loyal K9 companions, sat alert in their designated spots. Trained as military working dogs during Sarah's service days, they were no strangers to high-stress situations. Though they remained still for now, Sarah could tell they were ready to spring into action if needed. The harassment escalated quickly. The bikers grew bolder, surrounding her truck completely. Horns blared, engines roared, and shouts filled the air. One rider hurled an empty beer bottle that shattered against her windshield, leaving cracks spiderwebbing outward. Sarah flinched but kept her composure, refusing to give in to fear. She reminded herself that she had faced far worse challenges before, and she wasn't alone this time. With Max and Luna by her side, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. Whatever happened next, she would handle it head-on. The tension in the air was palpable as the bikers continued their relentless harassment. Their motorcycles roared like angry beasts, circling Sarah's truck with increasing aggression. One rider sped up alongside her passenger side window, his leather jacket gleaming under the fading sunlight. He leaned out precariously, pounding his fist against the glass with a loud thud that echoed through the cab. The sound startled Max and Luna, who shifted uneasily but remained seated, their eyes locked on their handler for guidance. Sarah clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. She knew panicking wouldn't help. Reacting impulsively could make things worse. Instead, she focused on controlling her breathing. Gripping the steering wheel tightly as she navigated the narrow highway, her mind raced with possibilities. Should she speed up? Pull over? Call for help? Each option carried risks, and she needed to weigh them carefully. For now, slowing down seemed like the safest choice, hoping the bikers would grow bored and move on. But they didn't. If anything, their behavior grew more brazen. Another biker swerved dangerously close to her trailer, kicking up dust and gravel as he zigzagged across the lane. His reckless maneuver forced an oncoming car to slam its brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. Horns blared in protest, and angry shouts filled the air. Sarah winced at the near miss, knowing how easily the situation could spiral out of control. She glanced at her rearview mirror again, watching as the group tightened their formation around her rig. They weren't just messing with her. They were trying to intimidate her into stopping. One of the riders revved his engine loudly, pulling ahead of her truck before cutting sharply back into her lane. The sudden movement startled Sarah, causing her to jerk the wheel slightly. Her heart pounded in her chest as she fought to steady the massive vehicle. Trucks weren't built for quick maneuvers, and any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. She muttered under her breath, "Come on, Sarah. You've got this." Her voice was barely audible over the din of engines and shouting, but it served as a reminder of her own strength and resilience. Inside the cab, Max let out a low growl, his ears flattened against his head. Luna mirrored his posture, her muscles tensed and ready to spring into action. Both dogs had been trained to respond to threats with precision and discipline, but Sarah hadn't given them the command yet. She wanted to avoid escalating the situation if possible. Still, their presence was a source of comfort. Knowing they were there, prepared to defend her if necessary, gave her a sense of security she desperately needed in that moment. The harassment reached a new level when one biker threw another object, a crumpled soda can this time, at her windshield. It bounced off harmlessly, but the message was clear. These men weren't going to back down anytime soon. Sarah felt a surge of frustration mixed with fear. She had worked too hard to build her life after leaving the military, and she refused to let anyone bully her or jeopardize her safety. Yet, she also knew better than to engage directly. Provoking them further could lead to even more dangerous outcomes. As the miles stretched on, the bikers' antics showed no signs of stopping. They taunted her relentlessly, laughing and hollering as if it were all some twisted game. Sarah's knuckles turned white as she gripped the wheel tighter, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She thought about calling 911, but cell service in this remote stretch of highway was spotty at best. Even if she managed to get through, help might not arrive in time. No, she realized, she was going to have to rely on herself and her loyal companions to get out of this mess. For a brief moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what might happen if she unleashed Max and Luna. Trained to handle far more intense scenarios during their military days, the dogs were capable of intimidating even the toughest opponents. But she hesitated, unsure if it was worth risking their safety, or hers, in such an unpredictable situation. Still, the thought lingered in the back of her mind, a quiet reassurance that she wasn't entirely powerless. Whatever came next, she vowed to face it with courage and determination. Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts as she tried to figure out her next move. The bikers showed no signs of letting up, their taunts growing louder and more aggressive with each passing minute. One of them rode dangerously close to her trailer, his motorcycle swerving erratically as if daring her to react. Another biker leaned out, shouting something unintelligible before tossing another object, a crumpled fast food wrapper, toward her windshield. It fluttered harmlessly to the ground, but the message was clear. They weren't going anywhere. Inside the cab, Max and Luna remained eerily still, their bodies coiled like springs, ready to leap into action at Sarah's command. Their loyalty and training were unmatched, and Sarah knew that if she gave the word, they would do whatever it took to protect her. But unleashing them wasn't a decision she could make lightly. These dogs weren't just tools. They were her companions, her family. She had adopted them after their military service ended, giving them a second chance at life away from the battlefield. The thought of putting them in harm's way made her stomach churn, even though she trusted their abilities completely. Still, their presence gave her strength. Sarah glanced at them briefly, her eyes meeting theirs in the rearview mirror. Max's golden-brown coat shimmered faintly in the fading light, while Luna's sleek frame exuded quiet power. Both dogs stared back at her with unwavering focus, their ears perked and tails stiff. They weren't afraid. They were waiting. Waiting for her signal, her permission to act. In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for these incredible animals who had always stood by her side, no matter what. The harassment continued unabated. One biker pulled alongside her truck again, this time banging on her passenger side window with enough force to rattle the glass. Sarah flinched but kept her eyes on the road, refusing to let him see her fear. She reached down instinctively to pat Max's head, her fingers brushing against his soft fur. The simple gesture calmed her nerves, grounding her in the present moment. "We've got this," she whispered softly, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to herself or to her dogs. Despite her resolve, Sarah knew she couldn't keep driving like this forever. A highway ahead was desolate, with no signs of civilization for miles. There were no other vehicles around to witness what was happening, and the isolation only heightened her sense of vulnerability. Pulling over seemed risky, but continuing to drive under these conditions was equally dangerous. Every time she adjusted her speed or changed lanes to avoid the bikers, she risked losing control of her massive rig. Something had to give, and soon. Her gaze flickered to the dashboard clock. Nightfall was approaching quickly, and the dimming light would only make things worse. Driving defensively was hard enough during daylight hours. Navigating this chaos in the dark would be nearly impossible. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself as she weighed her options. She thought about the countless hours she'd spent training Max and Luna, teaching them to respond to her every command with precision and discipline. They weren't ordinary pets. They were highly skilled partners, capable of handling situations far more intense than this one. As the bikers pressed closer, their engines roaring like thunder, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't keep running. If she didn't stand her ground now, they might never leave her alone. With a firm grip on the wheel, she signaled to pull over onto the shoulder of the road. Her heart pounded as she brought the truck to a stop, the rumble of the engine fading into silence. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet, until the bikers followed suit, parking behind her in a loose semicircle. Several dismounted, laughing and jeering as they approached her vehicle. One man pounded on her door, demanding she step out. Sarah sat frozen for a split second, her mind racing. Then, with a sharp whistle, she released Max and Luna from their harnesses. The dogs leaped out of the cab, standing shoulder to shoulder beside her, their imposing forms radiating authority. The laughter died instantly. The moment Max and Luna stepped out of the truck, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The playful jeers and mocking laughter from the bikers came to an abrupt halt, replaced by stunned silence. These weren't ordinary dogs. They were military-trained K9s, their presence commanding respect even before they made a single move. Max, a German shepherd with a muscular build and piercing eyes, stood tall beside Sarah, his hackles raised as he emitted a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. Luna, a sleek Belgian Malinois, mirrored his stance, her teeth bared in a silent but unmistakable warning. The bikers froze where they stood, their earlier bravado melting away like ice under the sun. One man took a hesitant step forward, perhaps trying to assert dominance or regain control of the situation. But before he could get too close, Max lunged slightly, snapping his powerful jaws just inches from the man's leg. The movement was quick, calculated, and deliberate, a clear demonstration of what he was capable of without actually causing harm. The biker stumbled backward, his face pale with shock, and muttered something unintelligible to his companions. Sarah crossed her arms over her chest, standing firmly between her dogs and the group of men now eyeing her warily. Her expression was calm but unyielding, her posture radiating quiet confidence. "I said back off," she repeated, her voice steady and firm. Though she wasn't shouting, there was no mistaking the authority in her tone. It was the same voice she'd used during her time in the military when issuing orders to her team, and it carried the same weight now. She glanced down briefly at Max and Luna, silently praising them for their flawless response. They hadn't attacked, but their mere presence had sent a crystal-clear message. These animals were not to be trifled with. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly debating their next course of action. Some of them looked ready to bolt, while others seemed torn between fear and frustration. One particularly bold rider, likely the ringleader, tried to mask his unease by cracking a nervous joke about big bad guard dogs. But his forced laughter fell flat, drowned out by the palpable tension hanging in the air. Even he couldn't hide the flicker of apprehension in his eyes as Luna began circling slowly, her movements fluid and deliberate, like a predator sizing up its prey. Sarah didn't flinch. She knew better than to let her guard down, even for a second. Years of experience had taught her that situations like this could turn volatile in an instant. Still, she allowed herself a small measure of satisfaction as she watched the biker's bravado crumble. These men had underestimated her, assuming she'd be an easy target because she was alone on the road. What they hadn't counted on was the bond between Sarah and her dogs, a partnership forged through years of trust, training, and mutual respect. "Listen carefully," Sarah continued, her words cutting through the heavy silence. "You can either leave now, or you can deal with them." She gestured toward Max and Luna, who remained perfectly still, their bodies taut with readiness. The implication was clear. If the harassment continued, the dogs wouldn't hesitate to act. And based on their body language, and the way the bikers had reacted so far, it was obvious that neither Max nor Luna would back down from a fight. The standoff dragged on for what felt like an eternity, though in reality, it lasted only a few minutes. Finally, one of the bikers muttered something under his breath and turned to walk back to his motorcycle. Another followed suit, mounting his bike without making eye contact. Slowly but surely, the rest of the group began retreating, their earlier arrogance replaced by visible discomfort. Within moments, all of them had climbed onto their bikes and revved their engines, speeding off into the distance without looking back. As the sound of their motorcycles faded into the night, Sarah exhaled deeply, releasing the tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her heart was still racing, but a wave of relief washed over her as she knelt down to check on Max and Luna. Both dogs were alert but calm, their protective instincts satisfied now that the threat had passed. "Good job, team," she murmured softly, scratching behind their ears. Their tails wagged slightly in response, a subtle sign of pride and contentment. Together, they had faced down danger and emerged victorious. With the bikers finally gone, Sarah allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. The adrenaline that had coursed through her veins during the confrontation was beginning to ebb, leaving behind a mix of relief and lingering unease. She knelt beside Max and Luna, her hands gently running over their strong, loyal bodies as she checked for any signs of stress or injury. Both dogs seemed perfectly fine, calm, focused, and ready to continue protecting her if needed. Their unwavering dedication never ceased to amaze her. As she stroked their fur, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how close things had come to escalating. If it hadn't been for Max and Luna, the situation could have turned far more dangerous. The biker's aggression had been relentless, and while she'd managed to keep her cool, there was no telling what might have happened if they'd forced her out of the truck. But thanks to her dog's training and instincts, she hadn't needed to find out. They had done exactly what they were trained to do: assess the threat, intimidate without attacking, and neutralize the danger before it got out of hand. The quiet of the desert highway settled around them once again, broken only by the soft rustle of wind and the distant hum of crickets. Sarah stood up slowly, brushing dust off her jeans as she surveyed the area. Her truck sat parked safely on the shoulder, its headlights casting long beams into the darkness. The shattered remnants of the beer bottle still clung stubbornly to her windshield, a jagged reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. She sighed heavily, knowing she'd need to clean it up later. But for now, she was just grateful to be safe. Max and Luna stayed close by her side, their protective energy still palpable even after the immediate threat had passed. Sarah smiled faintly at their devotion. "You two are my heroes tonight," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. She reached into the cab of the truck and pulled out a couple of treats from a small container she kept handy. Holding them out, she watched as the dogs eagerly accepted their rewards, their tails wagging in happy acknowledgement. It was a small gesture, but one that reinforced the bond they shared. A bond built on trust, teamwork, and years of working together. Feeling a bit more grounded, Sarah climbed back into the driver's seat, Max and Luna hopping in after her. She took a moment to collect herself, resting her forehead against the steering wheel as she let out a shaky breath. Though the immediate danger was over, the encounter left her shaken. She thought about how often truckers faced similar situations, harassment, intimidation, or worse, on lonely stretches of road like this one. For women drivers especially, the risks were even higher. Yet many didn't have the advantage of having highly trained K9s riding shotgun. Her mind wandered back to her time in the military, where she'd first met Max and Luna. Back then, they'd been part of elite units, trained for high-stakes missions in some of the most dangerous environments imaginable. When their service ended, Sarah had adopted them, giving them a second chance at life outside the battlefield. Little did she know how much they would continue to protect her, even in civilian life. Tonight was proof that their skills hadn't dulled. They were as sharp and reliable as ever. After a few minutes of reflection, Sarah decided it was time to get moving again. Staying parked on the shoulder wasn't ideal, especially not in such an isolated area. She started the engine, listening to the familiar rumble as the truck roared back to life. Max settled into his usual spot near the dashboard, while Luna curled up on the passenger side floorboard, both dogs seemingly content now that the tension had eased. As Sarah pulled back onto the highway, she glanced at them in the rearview mirror, her heart swelling with love and pride. The rest of the drive was uneventful, the open road stretching ahead under the starlit sky. Sarah kept the radio low, letting the soothing melodies fill the silence as she drove. Every so often, she'd glance at Max and Luna, finding comfort in their steady presence. By the time she reached the next rest stop, her nerves had steadied, and she felt a renewed sense of determination. This incident wouldn't deter her from doing her job. It would only remind her of her strength and resilience, qualities she shared with her four-legged companions. Before heading inside to grab a quick meal and stretch her legs, Sarah snapped a photo of Max and Luna lounging in the cab. She knew she wanted to share their story, not just because it was remarkable, but because it highlighted the incredible bond between humans and animals. As she uploaded the picture to social media later that night, she typed out a short caption, "Grateful for these two tonight. Never underestimate the power of teamwork." Little did she know, her post would soon inspire thousands of people. The next morning, as Sarah prepared to continue her journey, she decided to check her phone for the first time since the previous night's harrowing encounter. She wasn't expecting much, just a quick scroll through messages or updates before hitting the road again. But what she found stopped her in her tracks. Her social media post about the bikers and her dogs had gone viral overnight, racking up thousands of likes, comments, and shares. Strangers from all over the country were flooding her inbox with words of support, admiration, and gratitude. At first, Sarah was overwhelmed by the response. She hadn't intended to make headlines or spark a nationwide conversation. She'd simply wanted to share her story as a way of expressing gratitude for Max and Luna. Yet here she was, reading heartfelt messages from fellow truckers who had faced similar harassment on the road, dog lovers praising the loyalty and skill of military working dogs, and even veterans thanking her for highlighting the bond between handlers and their canine partners. Some people shared their own experiences of being bullied while driving, while others expressed relief that someone like Sarah had stood her ground and come out unscathed. One comment, in particular, caught her eye. A woman wrote, "As a female trucker myself, I know how scary it can be out there. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to back down." And those dogs, absolute heroes. The message resonated deeply with Sarah. She knew firsthand the challenges women faced in a male-dominated industry, where they often had to prove themselves just to earn respect. Seeing so many people rally behind her gave her a renewed sense of purpose and reminded her that she wasn't alone. Inspired by the overwhelming response, Sarah spent some time crafting a follow-up post. This time, she went into more detail about Max and Luna's background, explaining how they transitioned from military service to civilian life. She talked about the rigorous training they'd undergone, their roles during deployments, and the unique bond they'd formed with her over the years. "These dogs aren't just pets. They're family," she wrote. "They've saved my life more times than I can count, both on and off the battlefield." She also used the opportunity to raise awareness about two causes close to her heart: road safety for truck drivers and the adoption of retired military working dogs. Many people didn't realize how vulnerable truckers could be on long hauls, especially when traveling through remote areas. Harassment, theft, and even violence weren't uncommon. Yet these issues were rarely discussed openly. Similarly, retired K9s often struggled to find homes after their service ended, despite their incredible abilities and loving personalities. Sarah hoped her story would shine a light on both problems and encourage others to take action. By the time she finished writing, her phone was buzzing nonstop with notifications. News outlets had picked up her story, and interview requests began pouring in. While Sarah wasn't entirely comfortable with the sudden attention, she recognized it as an opportunity to amplify her message. She agreed to a few interviews, using them as platforms to advocate for safer highways and greater support for retired working dogs. Each time she spoke, she made sure to emphasize the importance of teamwork, not just between humans and animals, but within communities as well. That evening, as she parked at another rest stop to grab dinner, Sarah noticed something unusual. Several truckers approached her rig, introducing themselves and thanking her for speaking out. One man handed her a small care package filled with snacks and water bottles, saying, "We see you out here, and we got your back." Another driver offered to escort her partway along her route, ensuring she wouldn't face any trouble on the road ahead. It was a touching reminder of the camaraderie that existed among truckers, even if it wasn't always visible. Max and Luna seemed to sense the shift in energy too. As Sarah chatted with the other drivers, they lounged nearby, soaking up the attention and affection being lavished upon them. Someone snapped a photo of the trio together, capturing the moment perfectly. A strong, determined woman flanked by her fearless companions, united not just by circumstance, but by an unbreakable bond. For Sarah, it was more than just a feel-good story. It was proof that standing up for yourself could inspire others to do the same. And as she climbed back into her truck later that night, ready to tackle the miles ahead, she felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that she and her dogs had made a difference, one paw print at a time. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself adjusting to her newfound role as an advocate. The viral post had opened doors she never expected, connecting her with people from all walks of life who shared her passion for road safety and animal welfare. She began receiving invitations to speak at events, truck driver meetups, veteran gatherings, and even adoption fairs for retired working dogs. At first, public speaking made her nervous. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight. But every time she looked out at the crowd and saw their faces light up when Max and Luna appeared by her side, her nerves melted away. One event stood out in particular: a charity gala hosted by a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting military veterans and their K9 partners. Sarah was invited to share her story on stage, and though she initially hesitated, she agreed after learning that the proceeds would go toward funding medical care and rehabilitation programs for retired working dogs. The night of the gala, she dressed in her finest attire, while Max and Luna sported matching vests embroidered with patches from their military days. Together, they walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, the audience rising to their feet in admiration. Sarah's speech was heartfelt and personal. She spoke about her journey, from her early days in the military to her transition into trucking, and how Max and Luna had been constants through it all. "These dogs aren't just my protectors," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. They're my teammates, my confidence, and my family. They've taught me resilience, patience, and the true meaning of unconditional love. As she recounted the incident with the bikers, the room fell silent, captivated by her words. When she finished, the crowd erupted into cheers, many wiping tears from their eyes. The impact of her advocacy work extended beyond speeches and events. Inspired by the feedback she received online, Sarah started a blog where she documented life on the road with Max and Luna. Her posts ranged from practical advice for truckers, like staying safe during solo drives, to heartwarming stories about her adventures with her dogs. She also included tips for adopting retired military working dogs, highlighting their unique needs and incredible potential as companions. Her writing resonated with readers, and soon, her blog became a hub for people seeking guidance, inspiration, or simply a sense of connection. Her efforts didn't stop there. Recognizing the power of community, Sarah launched a social media campaign called #TruckerAnk9Heroes, encouraging others to share their own stories of teamwork and resilience. Truck drivers posted photos of their furry co-pilots, veterans reminisced about their K9 partners, and families shared tales of adopting retired working dogs. The campaign quickly gained traction, fostering a sense of unity among diverse groups bound by shared values. It also caught the attention of major organizations, leading to partnerships aimed at improving conditions for both truckers and animals. Despite her growing influence, Sarah remained grounded. She continued driving her routes, logging miles across highways and backroads, always accompanied by Max and Lena. Life on the road hadn't changed much in terms of routine, but there was a new energy to it now, an awareness that her experiences could inspire others. Strangers often recognized her at gas stations or rest stops, approaching her to thank her for her advocacy work. Some brought treats for the dogs, while others simply wanted to shake her hand. Each interaction reminded her why she'd chosen this path. Even Max and Luna seemed to thrive under the spotlight. They were naturals at public appearances, charming everyone they met with their calm demeanor and playful antics. Children loved petting them, adults marveled at their discipline, and fellow dog owners bombarded Sarah with questions about training and care. Through it all, the bond between the three of them only grew stronger. Whether lounging in the cab during long drives or posing for photos at events, they moved as one cohesive unit, a testament to years of trust and partnership. As Sarah reflected on how far she'd come since that tense night on the highway, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. What had started as a frightening encounter had transformed into something meaningful, a chance to make a difference not just for herself, but for countless others facing similar challenges. And as she prepared for another day on the road, she knew that no matter what lay ahead, she and her loyal companions would face it together, proving once again that courage, compassion, and teamwork could overcome anything. Months after the viral post and her growing advocacy work, Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. What began as a single act of standing up to harassment on a lonely highway had blossomed into a movement that touched lives across the country. Her story wasn't just about bravery or survival. It was about resilience, teamwork, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. And at the heart of it all were Max and Luna, whose quiet strength and unwavering loyalty continued to inspire everyone they met. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah received an email that brought tears to her eyes. It was from a young veteran named Jake, who had recently adopted a retired military working dog named Diesel. In his message, Jake explained how he'd been struggling with PTSD and feelings of isolation after leaving the service. He'd seen Sarah's story online and decided to take a chance on adopting Diesel, hoping the dog could help him heal. "Because of you," Jake wrote, "I found not just a companion, but a reason to keep going. Diesel and I are learning to trust again, together." Reading those words filled Sarah with a profound sense of purpose. She realized that her journey wasn't just about raising awareness. It was about creating connections between people, between communities, and between species. Every speech she gave, every blog post she wrote, and every photo she shared helped someone feel less alone. Whether it was a trucker facing harassment on the road, a veteran adjusting to civilian life, or a family considering adopting a retired K9, her story reminded them that they weren't alone in their struggles. Her advocacy work also led to tangible changes. After partnering with several nonprofits, Sarah helped secure funding for programs that provided free training sessions for adopters of retired working dogs. These sessions taught new owners how to care for their high-energy companions while addressing any behavioral challenges that might arise. Additionally, her efforts contributed to the creation of safer rest stops along major highways, equipped with better lighting, security cameras, and emergency call boxes, a small but significant step toward protecting drivers like herself. Max and Luna remained constant fixtures in her life, accompanying her everywhere she went. Though they were aging gracefully, their spirits remained as vibrant as ever. On long drives, they still perched by the windows, watching the world go by with curious eyes. At events, they greeted strangers with wagging tails and gentle nudges, spreading joy wherever they went. They weren't just symbols of protection anymore. They were ambassadors of hope, proof that even the toughest challenges could be overcome with love and determination. As winter approached, Sarah decided to celebrate her journey by organizing a special event, a Trucker and K9 Appreciation Day, at a large truck stop near her hometown. Dozens of truckers showed up, bringing their own pets or simply coming to show support. Retired military working dogs mingled with eager families interested in adoption, while local vendors offered food, games, and educational booths. The highlight of the day was a parade featuring trucks decorated with paw print decals and banners honoring both human and canine heroes. Sarah stood at the center of it all, Max and Luna by her side, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude. That evening, as she sat in her truck cab reflecting on the day's events, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. She thought about how far she'd come since that fateful night on the highway. The fear, the courage, the unexpected friendships, and the countless lives touched along the way. Max rested his head on her lap, while Luna curled up at her feet, their presence a comforting reminder of everything they'd endured together. Sarah smiled softly, gazing out at the starlit sky. Life on the road wasn't always easy, but it was hers, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. With Max and Luna by her side, she knew she could face whatever lay ahead. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through, and that sometimes, the most unlikely heroes could change the world, one paw print at a time.